and the movie begins inside a house in a suburban area. Soft, eerie music plays in the background, heightening the sense of unease. In the living room sits Father John, a priest sent to aid in an exorcism that's gonna begin in a few minutes. Once he has his equipment ready, John heads upstairs and through the picture-decorated hallway where he hears the demonic sound of a woman being tortured. When he enters the room, he's shocked to see the heavily pregnant woman with her skin lacerated all over, writhing on the bed as Father James splashes her with holy water. Seeing that it was almost time for the demon to leave, John goes to the corner of the room to add holy water, which the writhing woman uses to get sympathy from John. The demon in the woman's voice begs John to save her and her unborn baby, trying to convince him that the other priest is hurting her. Feeling guilty, James unties the woman, which gives the demon full control and causes the death of both the patient and Father James as they fall through the first-story window. A few months later, the traumatized John is excommunicated from the Catholic Church and sent to an asylum to help him deal with what he witnessed. In his cell, he's visited by Chaplain Henry, who provides him with a letter of dismissal from the church and offers his condolences. In a club out in the city, Molly is celebrating her 25th birthday and making partner at her firm. Seeing that she's a bit tipsy, one of her friends, Daryl, introduces her to Lydia, who she finds fascinating. After engaging in excessive alcohol and drugs, Molly takes Daryl and Lydia home with her despite her friends telling her not to. And after spending a very passionate night with these people, Molly awakens alone in her bed after hearing a knock on the door. When she answers it, she finds two cops who explain that they were there because they had received noise complaints and the sound of people screaming. After asking for permission, the officers enter her house and start looking, and as the first officers stand to watch Molly, the woman checks the bathroom and is shocked by the sight of the two cut-up bodies in the blood-filled tub. Putting her under arrest, they question Molly about what happened, but she seems disoriented by the loud sound in her ear, and the police seem unable to hear her. When she's repeatedly asked who had murdered the people in her tub, a trance-like look covers Molly's face, and she tells them that they had done it, referring to herself as two people and confusing the police. Months later, Molly undergoes her trial and is deemed to be criminally insane, forcing her to be kept in a Catholic asylum. As she was being taken in for processing, she has a strange encounter with the clerk who hallucinates that Molly's eyes are milky white and she's talking to her in a deep, raspy voice. Shocked by the phenomenon, the clerk, Janet, orders Molly to be taken for processing. After being shown to her private room, Molly has a horrible first night as she keeps hearing voices and hallucinates. Although she screams and pleads for help, no one comes to her aid. The following morning, Molly's woken up by a Dr. Lori, who introduces herself and explains that she'll be meeting with her several times throughout the week during her stay at the hospital. Sitting in front of her, Lori begins her evaluation by asking about Molly's father, who'd offed himself in a mental institution after being found guilty of murdering her mom. Molly mentions that her parents practice the occult and explains to her doctor that she thinks that she's possessed. She's sure that Lori won't be able to help her and demonstrates that fact by forcibly blowing the files from the doctor's hands. Later, Lori's unnerved by the time that she had with Molly and starts to do further research, and the doctor finds out that both Molly's counselor in high school and her boyfriend were found dead in a strange murder-suicide. Both people had ties to a cult which Molly was part of due to her parents, but managed to escape. After Molly's admittance, strange things started to happen throughout the hospital, making the employees really frightened of her. The following day, Lori has another session with the girl that's claiming to be possessed. While talking to Molly, she mentions her old counselor and her ex-boyfriend, which makes Molly vomit yellow goo all over the doctor. That night, while working late in her office, Lori gets a call from one of the orderlies asking her to come to the patient ward, and when she gets there, she's shocked to see all of the patients simultaneously banging their heads on the wall, keeping the same rhythm. Rushing toward Molly's room, they find her doing the same thing and are forced to stop her before she hurts herself. Lori was forced to have Molly sedated and transferred to a room with padding so she doesn't hurt herself further. And the following day, the doctor approaches Molly and asks her once again about her counselor, who Molly quoted as saying that she was chosen to bring Satan into a mortal realm during the trial. Molly believed that she was possessed by the devil on her 18th birthday and was growing the devil, which would take 6 years, coming to pass on her 24th birthday. Lori believes that the girl's symptoms were actually psychosomatic and were happening only because she believed in it. After spending the day in the church, James was in his room and he hears the haunting words of the demon he mistakenly trusted echoing from the corridor where Molly was confined. As he attempts to listen, the Bible in his hands trembles and falls to the floor, and filled with unease, he quickly decides to leave the eerie surroundings. Hours later, Lori decides to check on Molly, but is shocked when she sees the girl standing on the roof, holding the form of a reverted cross. As she gets close to check on her, Molly opens her eyes and flings the doctor across the room, holding her in the area for a few minutes. Screaming in fear, Lori bangs at the door for the orderlies to arrive and restrain the aggressive Molly, and the frightening experience convinces Lori that Molly might truly be possessed. The next morning, the doctor goes to the hospital church and finds John praying there, and taking him outside, she speaks to him about Molly and asks him to help her because he was once an ordained priest. John explains that he's unable to help in any way because he's been excommunicated from the church and his rights to becoming an exorcist are stripped. Laura mentions that due to bad media, the Catholic Church has stopped training priests in exorcism and that he was the only one in America who had the hands-on training. She begs him to at least take a look at Molly because she is sure that the police won't believe her, and Lori promises the ex-priest that she will sign his release papers if he promises to help her. While they converse, they notice the asylum clerk Janet standing at the window of the top floor after announcing that he's coming, and Janet jumps, plunging herself to death. After the gruesome incident, John asks Lori to let him talk to Molly privately, to which she agrees. Getting inside the room, John demands to speak to Molly, but the demon possessing her refuses, taunting him with his previous failures. After arguing for a while, the demon lets John see a glimpse of Molly, who begs him to help her. After leaving the room, John decides to consult Henry before making his decision, and explaining the situation and Molly's condition, John stresses that the girl needs help immediately, and although he tells him that the church would never condone an exorcism in this day and age, Henry urges him to help the girl but to also think about the consequences that might come along with it. Going downstairs, Henry retrieves John's priest clothes and equipment and gives it to him in good faith. Preparing to battle the demon inside Molly, John heads to the hospital dressed in his ornate clothes and ready with his holy items. He then begins his prayer standing in front of the girl and starts splashing her with holy water. As he continues his prayer, he sees letters being etched on the skin of her forehead, distracting him for a few seconds. After taking a few moments to collect himself outside, John returns to Molly's cell with new vigor and continues the ritual. Although he fights tooth and nail to exorcise the demon, it seems too strong to leave so easily, making John doubt himself. Returning to his room, he finds Lori encouraging him by telling him that he needs to have faith in himself instead of worrying if whether his belief in God was less than his fear of the devil. Feeling better about himself, he returns with renewed strength and starts his prayer yet again, but the demon seems unscathed as it yells out that its birth was close. Ignoring its words, John prepares the artifact used to trap demons inside and forces the beast to take the form of insects and crawl inside of it. Once the hundreds of wasps were ejected from her body, Molly falls back on her bed feeling exhausted, and after her exorcism, she's moved to her normal room so she can recuperate, and a couple of days later, John goes over to visit her and finds her functioning normally. Molly thanks the priest wholeheartedly, telling him that she would never be able to repay him for what he did for her. But telling her that she doesn't need to repay him, he leaves her alone to rest. As he walks back to his room to collect his belongings, John notices that he's being watched strangely by all the patients. Choosing to ignore it, he heads to Henry's residence and gives him the equipment that he used for the exorcism for safekeeping, along with the item that he had trapped the demon in. While Henry goes down to the basement, John looks around and is shocked to find a satanic book on the priest's study table. When the priest returns, John confronts Henry about the book, who tells him that he was studying up on the ritual that Molly had gone through. Offering him a seat, Henry explains the signs etched on Molly's forehead during the exorcism were the mark of the devil. He tells him that it symbolizes a version of the second coming, but indicating the devil instead of Jesus. Henry explains that this will only happen during a ritual involving the contained spirit of the devil and its mother, who needed to be murdered. Realizing Molly might still be in danger, John asks to see the item that the devil was trapped in, but is surprised to only find a stone inside. Before he could realize what was happening, Henry hits him over the head, causing him to lose consciousness. And when John awakens, he finds himself back in the hospital and discovers that all of the patients have actually offed themselves by drinking poison. And apparently, Molly had been kidnapped from her room and taken by a cult member to undergo the ritual. A few minutes later, one of the orderlies comes into John's room and leads him to a different place by holding him against his will with a gun. John's taken to the hospital's basement, where Henry was about to start the ritual of resurrecting the devil, encircled by his followers, and once Henry had John bear witness as he considered him the devil's father, he gets ready to sacrifice Molly. But before he can plunge the blade inside of her, Laurie stabs him in the back, arriving just in time and seeing all her patients dead. As the insects emerge out of the ornament and start attacking the followers, John, Molly, and Laurie manage to escape. While running through the hospital yard, the three are ambushed by the orderly with a gun, but he is stopped from firing the gun by the police, who arrive just in time after being called by a panicked Laurie. The next morning, the police manage to raid Henry's records and find out that he had been present since Molly's birth, leading them to the names of all the cult members. As he was helping her inside the ambulance, John and Laurie inform the traumatized girl that she is now finally safe. But in the ending scene, we're taken a long distance away from the hospital, and we see a school bus with open windows transporting children to school, and through one of the windows, one of the insects that escaped the priest's ornaments flies inside and slowly starts walking toward a quiet girl sitting at the back. And that is where this thrilling movie comes to an end. If you want to watch more creepy horror movie recaps, make sure to subscribe and leave a comment. We'll see you next time. Bye.